Hello, and welcome to the SharePoint Framework and JavaScript Special Interest Group bi-weekly meeting. It is June 21st, 2018. I'm Patrick Rogers, joined as always by Vesa Juvonen, and we've got another great call for you this week. As always, we're going to start off with a quick description about what this call is about and how we got started. So we're part of the larger SharePoint Patterns and Practices program, and we started these special interest group calls because we needed a place to have a little bit more focused discussion around different topic areas. And we had our monthly calls had kind of grown too much, and we weren't really able to cover things. And folks, folks are very interested in PowerShell, but not JavaScript or vice versa. So we created these special interest groups so folks that had a real interest in client-side development, in this case, or the PowerShell CSOM development in the other special interest group call, could focus on those areas, and we could have demos and really drill down into those topics. And we definitely are always covering an open discussion about the SharePoint framework, the latest news, upcoming release schedule, things like that, new features, as well as associated client-side development patterns with the SharePoint framework. And as well, we talk about the PnP JS libraries, which is a reusable set of JavaScript libraries that we, as a community, have written to hopefully make everybody's client-side development life in SharePoint a little bit easier, whether you're working in SharePoint Framework or not. So we have two links down there at the bottom. The SPFx-community link will take you to the Microsoft Tech community for SharePoint. So that's a great place to ask general questions. If you have questions about how do I design my solution, or the merits of using React over Angular, things like that, that's a great place to ask those kind of general questions and get answers and support from other folks in the community. And the second link there, spdev-docs, takes you to the official Microsoft developer documentation for SharePoint. And that is all of the developer documentation is moving to that location. So whether you're new to SharePoint Framework and want to get started with that, you can see all the tutorials for SharePoint Framework there. If you are doing add-in development, or even if you're doing solution package development like old WSP, I shouldn't call it old, managed code WSP solution deployment, all the docs for those are moving there as well. And so you can find all your SharePoint development documentation all in one spot. And we're always working to improve that and add new documentation and fix any problems. And as with everything we do, if you see a problem or some missing data or missing article, something like that, please do let us know so we can try and get that resolved. I do have a question there. Is there supposed to be a presentation? Seeing a black screen. Can folks see the presentation? Yes.
All good. All good.
Yep. Okay. Great. Thanks. I think maybe if you just rejoin. So our agenda for today: an engineering update on SharePoint Framework, and we've got updates on the PnP JS client libraries, Office 365 CLI, and the SPFx reusable controls. And as well, we've got two great demos from the community. Sebastian has a VSTS and SharePoint demo, kind of tying things together for continuous integration. Very cool. And then Hugo has a React calendar feed web part. It's a really neat little web part he wrote, and he's going to show us that in the call, and we'll have some time at the end for Q&A. Excuse me. But before we get to the SharePoint update, do real quick want to mention opportunities to participate. So you can always demo a SharePoint Framework solution or a use of the PnP JS libraries in a project. Any demo involving both of those things or either of those things is absolutely welcome. And of course, a demo just doing client-side development in SharePoint, even if you're not using SharePoint Framework or the PnP JS libraries, is of course welcome as well. So all things client-side development. I know you all are doing some awesome stuff out there for your customers or just for yourselves to learn, and this is a great forum for you to come demo that. Get some exposure for your work, but as well, we all get the benefit of learning from what you are doing. You can as well contribute on GitHub. So contribute on GitHub is reporting issues. Everybody's saying they lost the presentation.
I can actually say that. Interesting.
You've lost it too.
No. I can see that. I can see your presentation. Let's do try the still have it. Okay, so
All right, we're just going to plow through, and
Yes.
This will be like last time. I'll just end up talking to myself for 5 minutes before I notice.
Yeah, that was
nobody
pretty
can hear me.
awesome.
Yeah, especially if you're me, right?
Sure.
So contributing to GitHub, reporting issues, submitting pull requests to any of the various libraries, things like that are really great. Really appreciate those contributions. And then finally, as well, just feedback on kind of everything we're doing. Feedback on these calls. Feedback on all the work we're doing. The libraries, the SharePoint framework, our demos, our content, everything. Just so all that feedback really drives what we do and is really valuable, and we very much appreciate it. So, update now on the SharePoint framework from Vesa.
Actually, yeah. So let me take this as a presenter. Let's try this one more time. So this is going to reconnect because I'm taking that as a presenter. And let's see if we can actually make this work. And working again. So Ilya actually got it as well. Cool. So that's the way we can actually reassociate the presentation. So apparently it failed for some people. Anyway, so we will have 3 different demos actually today. I forgot about updating the agenda because Ilya is going to do a core demo as well. But before we go there, let's have a quick look on the SharePoint framework and what's happening over there. And please remember to mute yourself. There's some typing or something happening somewhere. I'm just trying to hunt down who has a microphone on. Cool, there we go. Excellent. So on SharePoint framework, so let me actually stand up because I can't present without by sitting on my computer. So first of all, Patrick already talked about this one. I promise to keep this slide in every single presentation what I do. AKMS SP DevDocs is the official documentation location, and this is replacing MSDN. MSDN is going to be shut down by end of this month, which is quite horrifying, but there are reasons why that is actually happening. The docs platform, you're able to contribute, you're able to comment, you're able to participate, and it's much more flexible, and we're adding additional capabilities there as well. So AKMS SP DevDocs, we had almost 900,000 views already last month. We're gonna hit pretty close 1 million during this month based on prediction, but we'll see how it goes. Now, issue list, reminder on that one as well. This is clearly getting traction, which is really good. So if you run into any issues on SharePoint framework or in a SharePoint development in general, if you have a Premier support agreement, please report them using that channel. But if you don't, and you try to open a support case through SharePoint Online Support, they will actually tell you that they cannot help you. The reason for that one is that they don't have expertise to help you on those and supporting on the developer topics. Now, I would ask again everybody to mute themselves because there's some background noise, which was a quite logical reaction on my story as well. Now, so the issue list is there for you to report issues on the API and development story. We in the engineering, we triage this at least 2 times in a week, and we are then making actions and investments on fixing stuff based on your reports and based on your reported stuff. And Patrick, I'm going to mute you as well because you're making notes. There we go. Now, some new updates on the usage. So these are updated today. So from Wednesday, so this is actually having yesterday's data as well. They do not have actual numbers, but they give you the indication on the growth. So the left one is showing how the actual user-based growth is, how people are actually using SharePoint Framework and third-party customizations in SharePoint Online, and how it's actually growing quite nicely. The right side is actually showing the same, but based on a tenant, so a tenant-level usage. And what's interesting here, and we've seen this now for a few weeks, the tenant usage is growing exponentially, and it seems to indicate, based on our statistics, that more and more developers are actually now starting using SharePoint Framework. So it seems to be that we're heading towards summer in the northern hemisphere, and that means that people maybe have more time, I don't know, to learn new stuff and start adapting on the SharePoint framework as well. Now, earlier today, kind of related on this one, a sidetrack, but earlier today I was working on the upcoming SharePoint 2019 versions and packages, and it is actually pretty cool that in SharePoint 2019 you can build SharePoint framework solutions. Right now, we actually, I think last time in a call we said that it will be at least 1.4 version of SharePoint framework in the SharePoint 2019. The version which I was testing earlier today had 1.5. So we're trying to get the latest version of SharePoint framework for you to take advantage in SharePoint 2019 as well, which is really cool because then you can build one solution which will work both on premises and in cloud as well. And a small reminder on muting. Cool. Now, what's new on the roadmap or the development side? Nothing that dramatical, obviously, since 2 weeks from SharePoint framework perspective, except that we will release a 1.5.1 version of SharePoint framework. This was technically being almost too transparent again. We were planning to actually originally get it live or out yesterday, then potentially today, but it might be actually that we have to delay that to the early next week because we need to make sure that the server-side deployments and server-side dependencies have been delivered worldwide. So that's causing us now small delays. The 1.5.1 itself is basically a fix for 1.5. So we had some regressions in the 1.5, and we're now addressing those in the 1.5.1. And 1.6 is then coming out on the late July if everything goes well. And based on this learning, probably 1.6.1 will come a week after that. No, just kidding. But obviously, we're trying to fix the quality issues which we had in the 1.5 as well. Now, there's a good question actually from Matthias. Extensions, are they coming on SharePoint 2019? The answer is yes. The SharePoint 2019 will support the full setup of SharePoint Framework. So SharePoint Framework extensions and SharePoint Framework client-side web parts. The reason is pretty obvious. In SharePoint 2019, we will ship modern experience. So you're able to create modern theme sites, which are not group associated because it's on-prem, or you're able to provision modern communication sites. That's pretty cool because then you're able to deploy your SharePoint Framework solutions and customize things over there as well. Now, coming back on the 1.5.1, so like I said, this is coming soon. It might come out today, later today. Most likely it's not coming out tomorrow. If we can't ship it today, it's going to then come early next week, addressing some of the API issues what we were having related on 1.5. Now, good question on the timelines and roadmap around the Teams integration, the Teams solution and Teams integration, which I demoed in Build and in SPC and in a few other conferences in May, is now planned to go to review in 1.7. So if I go one step back here, this is the roadmap. 1.6 is coming end of July. 1.7 potentially, most likely, will have the Teams tab integration inside of it. So, and that's going to be the plan for that one is now for Ignite. Good. Cool. Moving on things, I don't want to spend too much time on this stuff because there's a few slides and we have 3 demos coming up today as well. Because I'm sorry for missing earlier your name on the agenda, but Patrick, I will throw it to you if you can unmute yourself.
We'll see here. So taking back over. A quick update on the PnP client-side libraries, PnP JS. Next release scheduled for July 6th. If you're wondering when releases are going to be, we are setting up milestones for each release, so you can always check in the repository in the GitHub for the milestones. That'll give you the release dates. So we do try and stick to those. Every once in a while we'll miss by a day or two, but we try and hit those pretty close. Just want to mention again, the SP taxonomy library is out and released, so please do give that a try. It's a great way to access your managed metadata in SharePoint. I will be recording that demo again to get that out for folks to see that, but do give that a try, give us feedback on that. And a big update, we have finally gotten the libraries are now published on CDN.js. So that's a big step. I know a lot of folks were waiting for that for their external packaging and things like that. So those are now published. So you can find those on CDN.js just by searching for PnP. And as well, we'll have an article with details on that published in the docs with the next release as well. Thanks as always for the feedback. We've been getting some great feedback over the last couple weeks. And I'm going to kind of put a question out there. Don't answer it right now in the chat window, but think about where you'd like to see us focus our energy next. What kind of features you might be looking for, what kind of capabilities, and let us know in the issues list ideas for features or enhancements, and we'll take a look at those. Can't promise we'll do necessarily everything that gets mentioned, but very much want to hear from you all what is important or what would help you in the work you're doing. So think about that and post an issue for us so we can have a look and think about that. Reminder, weekly beta releases are on Friday, and then the changelog is updated with each change, so you can see as things are changing, you can track that pretty much in real time. And just sort of the kind of almost final reminder before it happens, PnP JS, the last version is going to be published in July. If you haven't started migrating, please, now's the time to start. Definitely recommend you begin migrating. If you're starting new projects, definitely use the PnP JS, libraries there. And then if you have any issues transitioning or you get stuck or there's something blocking you from transitioning, just let us know. We definitely want to hear that, and we definitely want to get that resolved so you can transition over. Because if you have something blocking you, it's probably blocking some other folks, and we want to make sure that's not the case. For PnP JS, we'd love to see support for property bag and index property bag. Awesome. Put in the issues list, please. That's the best way for us to track things and make sure we don't forget about or just ignore anything. So if you put it in there, we can track it as a real sort of feature. So links to the docs, the github.io link there for the PnP JS docs. We try and have as much information there as we can. We got a comment that the docs aren't very good this week. We get that comment a couple times a week generally. If you see a problem with the docs, do let us know. We do try and improve them. And if you have a couple minutes, please do help us with the docs. We can very much use that help. Typically, our time gets spent, fixing issues, writing new features, and looking at folks' questions in the issues list. And docs, sadly, but I think understandably, sort of falls aside a little bit in the priorities. So if you have a couple minutes, that's a place you can have a real impact. Write a docs article or enhance an existing docs article, and we'll very much appreciate your help there. You can follow the hashtag PnPJS on Twitter, and you can follow me at MediocreBowler, and that will get you announcements from me, basically. I don't really post a whole lot other than things related to the PnP JS library. Maybe off topic, what about handling the time on client side? Now it is a pain to convert events to users' time zone and back with JS. Will it be out-of-the-box solution to work with date? Dates are just kind of a pain. AC just mentioned Moment.js does a lot with dates. I don't know that we are going to implement anything specific around dates. There's other libraries out there that do it and do it much more thoroughly than I have any interest in doing dates. So I would check out Moment.js. So moving on to the Office 365 CLI. Am I doing this update, Besa?
I think, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
You can do that. Waldek is not on the call.
Great.
Technically, AC could do the update as well, but feel free.
Cool. So Office 365 CLI, new beta 1.4.0 is out with support for upgrading SharePoint framework projects. So this is a really cool thing Waldek and AC have been working on, where you'll actually be able to run a command and update your SharePoint framework projects to the next version. So this is a very cool feature. It's in beta, so it may not be perfect at this point. So try it out. Obviously, any feedback you have on that, please let us know. But it's a very cool thing, and it's going to let you very easily update your SharePoint framework projects to the next version. Checking files in and out, as well as getting information about list items is all new in that beta. Stuff that's in progress is more support and refinement around that SPFx version upgrading, and then some additional commands. And then as well, for Office 365 CLI, if you have ideas about what else could be useful and what else would be valuable, please do post in that issues list as well. So you can always install the latest beta. The command is there, the npm install. And then more information, aka MS0365 CLI. And you can follow the hashtag Office365 CLI on Twitter. There's a Gitter channel there. And then that docs link is that same aka MS link that will get you the details there around the documentation and the usage. So around the SPFx reusable controls, Elio, I think you're on the call. Did you want to do your own update?
And Elio has a demo on this one as well. So, Elio.
Yes, yeah, I was unmuting myself. So, yeah, I can do it. So I can already. Is my demo immediately after this one? Then I can already.
Yes, it is right after this one. Yes.
So let me share my screen. And Leo, if you see my screen. Do you already see something?
Yep,
I got it on mine.
Still look.
Yeah, it's an awesome looking SharePoint Stargate. Woohoo!
So first of all, the updates. So we had a new release this week or last week for the property controls. Version 1.7.0 is out with some new enhancements. The best enhancement, I think, is the npm post install, which is an install script which automatically adds the localization to your configuration file, so you don't have to do any manual action before. So before you had to do a manual action, now you don't have to do it because the script is going to do it for you. So that's an awesome thing. We also have some new fields available for the collection data control, which I'm going to show you, which is a quite awesome control which we have and also use in the showcase web art. For the React controls, we have version 1.5.0 being released this week with a new people picker and some enhancements to the taxonomy picker and some bug fixes in the field user rendering and also in the taxonomy picker. So that's part of our releases that we had this week. So first of all, let's see this one. So we have the starter kit, and in the starter kit from PnP, we have a couple of web arts and extensions, but one of, or actually two of these web arts, they contain a special control, which is the collection data control. The collection data control allows you to create list data behind the scenes, but without actually using a list. So it could be that you have a case where you want to add multiple like for instance, weather widgets on your page, but you want to do it from one web art. That way, with our collection data control, you can specify the fields you need within your web art, and you can add multiple of them. So we are going to see everything, so how you build it. So we are actually going to rebuild this control behind the scenes of how it works. So this is my web art. It's just an empty one, which is not working. So if I'm going to open it, and it should not be working, there shouldn't be a text box. Okay. So there's nothing in this web art right now. What I'm going to use is the property fields for the collection data, and everything can be found always on the documentation. So if you go to the property control documentation underneath controls, you find, and it's the first one because it's alphabetically ordered. There you can find all the information about what you have to do. So you have to do your importing. You have to specify which collection data you see any. I know we all like TypeScript these days, and any, that's something you never want to use, but I'm not sure what you're going to use inside your collection data, so that's why I'm specifying any. If you like interfaces, feel free to create an interface for it, and that makes it a lot better, but for now it's any. And then you can copy and paste these things inside your control and fiddle around with it so that it's working for you. So first of all, let me do that in my web art. So I have my collection data over here. So it actually needs a key, like any field control that we have, a label, and we can give it a panel header. Description is optional. We have a button label, which will become available when we open the property pane, a value. This is the actual value of the data, and some fields. So if I'm going to save this and refresh, actually nothing is going to happen because it doesn't contain any fields. But you see that it's now being rendered over here. So what I want to do is I want to add a new field in here, and I can specify a title. This is a title which is being shown in the table which is going to render the collection data. I have to give it an ID. This is your key or the ID behind the scenes of how you're going to work with that data. So I give it a name title with a lowercase t, and we also need to have a type. The type defines what the type of data is you want to add. So it's custom collection field type. And right now we support Boolean dropdown, fabric icons, numbers, string, and URLs. So let's create a string for this one. And once I save and reload to configure, now the error message is gone. When I click configure, now you see that it has some titles. So this is quite an easy one. But the good thing about this is you can add multiple things to your collection. So right now there's nothing in the collection because we just started it. But we can add multiple things in here. Like for instance, let's say PnP, we can click on the plus sign. We can say a blog, and we can say news. We can click on add and save. And if everything works, we now have our tiles working, but there's no actual functionality behind it. So no logo and no links and no descriptions yet. So that's what we are going to create right now. So let's remove this and put my second snippet in place. So this snippet contains more fields. So you can see the title again with a required option. So everything is not required by default. So if you want to require it, then you just put the property required in place. I added a description field, which is not required. I added a URL, which is a URL field, which has some validation based on the URL. I have an icon field, which I put in place, or the Fabric UI icon. And this is going to show a UI icon coming from a UI Fabric. And you just have to put in the name of that icon, and then it's going to visualize that icon if there is an icon for it. Targets specifies how and where you want to open that link. So if you want to do it in the current browser tab or in a new tab. And that's it. If I'm going to refresh this one, I'm going to go open my collection data again. You see new fields arising. So I can say PnP website, HTTPS, aka.ms/SPFx. We can give it a logo. So we can already see from the moment I start typing that there's a logo appearing. So if you actually accidentally mistype yourself, you don't see a logo. If you spell it right, you see the logo appearing. I can do the same. For my blog, and I can say website, and let's say news. These are news websites. And our news website has a really cool URL, which is news.com. And let's see if there's a news icon. Yes, there is. And from the moment we insert everything, we can just store this. And this right now has our new data. So now you see the icon appearing. You see the description fields appearing, and we can already click on it. I don't know. I will click on this one so that it shows the actual page where we were linking to. And now there are two web parts. Oh, there's one again. So probably a mistake in my rendering of the page. Same thing works for the links web part, which is also a web part which is available in the starter pack. There we have two collection data fields, and one is for the grouping, so we can specify the groups which you have. So you can say, this is my new field, and over here in the second group, we can just say, okay, this belongs to news. If we save it and store that again, you see that the links are being grouped underneath the right grouping labels you specified. You don't have to specify any group names. That's just optional. So if you don't want to use them, you don't do it. Like for instance, here in the useful links one, you see in the grouping options, there is actually no group names defined. So in the group name over here, it's still empty. So it's fully customizable. Everything what you want in your web part can be created with it. So if you want to add a new field, feel free to do so. Just be aware at the moment we don't support all kinds of information, so we don't have a date field yet. So if you want to have it inserted, feel free to add it to the issue list or start working on that and do PRs to our awesome controls. So that was it on my side.
Excellent, thank you, Julia. And I do apologize, Hugo and Sebastian, for us taking slightly more time than expected, but you both should have now 12 to 15 minutes. But this is really cool. And if you're interested on just testing the Tiles web part, the Tiles web part is actually part of the SharePoint Starter Kit. In the package folder of that repo, you actually can find an SPPKG file and just upload that to your tenant. You do not have to provision all of the site collections if you just want to test some of the capabilities. Now, what Elio was just showing, I don't think that's precisely the same version yet in the starter kit, or is it, Elio? Do you remember what is the latest in the starter kit? It might be that we're missing.
I think the latest version.
Yeah.
No, I think it's the same version.
Okay. So it should be there, and the tiles, well, the tiles web part is a good example. It used to be actually tied into a list. Now it's tied into this collection editor, which is then storing the data as part of the web part properties. So now you don't have to provision a list to be able to configure the web part, which is really, really, really cool. Now let's move to, I think Sebastian was first on the list. So Sebastian, you can actually unmute and start screen sharing.
Yes, I'm unmuted.
Yep.
I had to turn off my headphones. Hopefully everybody can hear me properly.
Yeah, all good, absolutely.
Okay, then let me share my screen and just 1 second. Tell me if you can see.
Let's see, crossing fingers. Come on, Skype, you can do that. It's loading, 3 dots.
You should see my happy face.
And we can see your happy face. Yes, that is correct. Cool.
That's good. So just for a short introduction, my name is Sebastian Schütze. I'm from Berlin, Germany, born in Berlin, and I was in the past a SharePoint developer. That's my background, and before that, web developer. And I shifted slowly more and more into DevOps with Azure. So, and this is the connection to this call today, since I got pretty much knowledge in SharePoint development, and I know some problems, especially when it comes to CI/CD problems with DevOps. I created a solution. I want to just give a short introduction how it came to that. Last year, I was working for the elevator company Schindler, and they were building a full ALM platform with the Microsoft stack and Azure. So we built up a complete development environment in Azure with VSTS, Distributed Team Services, and the full CD/CI pipeline to make everything automatized, also with infrastructure as code and everything that you can imagine that is possible with Azure and DevOps with Microsoft. And I was part of a bigger team, the SharePoint development team, and we had problems that at that time there was nothing like we could deploy anything with the pipeline with just one task like SharePoint add-ins, SharePoint framework, or even to use the nice PnP PowerShell provisioning library in a very easy way. So we had these problems. You always needed, for every project had PowerShell scripts that we needed to create. We needed to make sure that on agents to deploy that all libraries are there, that the libraries have the right version. And so we had big problems with maintainability, or we wanted to prevent these problems and to not rewrite everything again, to make it as simple as possible. And we also wanted to give an easy opportunity on VSTS to introduce the administrator in, let's say, configuration as code for SharePoint, to use the PnP libraries in an easy way so that they can somehow configure some sites or deploy sites always in the same way, in an easy way. Of course, there is the partner pack, but we're talking about more configuration things and much more. And so what we did, or what I did in that part, was creating a VSTS task, extension for VSTS that includes basically in the past it included also adding SharePoint add-ins for SharePoint 2013, 16, and SharePoint Online. That is currently not inside of that task, but what is inside is using the full power of the PnP PowerShell library. And I recreated this year, and I decided to put it online. And there was nothing before like this. I just noticed that there is an MVP who just published another task like this for PnP PowerShell. And this task, this extension could give you the possibility to use PnP provisioning XML or inline PowerShell to deploy things. And I will show you a bit later about how you can use it and where to get it. So yeah, basically 2 tasks that's already in the marketplace since 2 months or 3 months. That includes 2 tasks. That is provisioning XML that you can use either inline XML, or you can link to an XML file in your pipeline that you had in your build package. Or you could also use reference a PowerShell file that is only includes PnP PowerShell, and you don't need to worry about anything like downloading the library or anything like this to install a library on the agent or anywhere. Basically the task takes care about to download the PowerShell module from the PowerShell gallery, and currently it always gets the newest version of this one. And this is making the life pretty much easier for you. So I'm showing you a bit of what I'm talking about. So basically here, what I did, I had to be a little bit creative to test this extension, since when I'm publishing this extension, I always have this problem that, of course, I cannot test the solution and publish the solution but without interfering with others who installed this solution. So I have a test instance to try to make integration tests on this extension that I'm using. And when I'm currently here in VSTS, and I'm currently in the release pipeline, and here I have a release definition where I have several tasks where I use all these 2 tasks that I have created. And here there are different environments, and here is these tasks that I have here. And basically there are 2 different kinds of tasks. One is the PowerShell inline task that you can find very easily when you search for a task that you can create. Then you have these 2 possibilities. And within that task, you have the possibility to choose which version it is for. Is SharePoint Online, SharePoint 2016 or 2013. So this task, this extension is be able to be used on VSTS as well as TFS, at least the last TFS version that is out. And then maybe some of you who use VSTS with CD/CI, you have already maybe known this PowerShell inline task that works pretty much the same. And you have the possibility to either link to PowerShell files yourself that you have in your builds, and then you can link to it if you want, or you have the possibility to just write a short PowerShell script of your own. For example, here I have a PowerShell script that is basically just logging into a tenant and creating a site and then deleting the site. Or you have the other task that gives you the possibility to use just the PnP XML, provisioning XML, and that's basically the same concept. You just need to give your credentials and the target URL, and then you have the possibility either to use inline or you choose a file. In that case, for example, here you link to a file that is in your build package. And from the concept, I tried to be as close as possible to the PnP PowerShell command, which is PnP apply PnP provisioning template. So you will pretty much see the same option that this one provides. For example, handlers that you want to use, or you have parameters in that script, or you could even go down and have all the options that this one provides. So it's basically a forwarding, but has the comfort of having a proper UI and having a script before checking your input. For example, if your target web URL is correct or not. And so in that way, you have much less errors to expect, because you just need to make sure that the template is working properly and not that your PowerShell or somehow is working properly. Except I made a bug or something, but that's something I need to fix. The only problem that I have now, I haven't had the chance to really well test for SharePoint 2013, so testing help is in that always appreciated. But I expect, since I'm mostly using the PnP PowerShell, so I expect that it's working for 2013, since this task is caring about which version of the library is downloaded. And if you care about also on running the task and you think, it's downloading the task every time, so I'm also checking if the task is already downloaded on the release agent, it's not downloading again. So it's on a proper folder in the agent, which is recommended to be used on an agent. So you don't need to care about that as well. That it's taking space, or every time, like with NPM packages, that's taking lots of time to download again and again. This is not happening here. If you're using a hosted agent, your own agent. If you have a hosted agent, then of course there is another problem that you have. So just to show you a quick demo, I'm running all through these tasks here. What I'm basically doing in these tasks is I'm just renaming the title. I'm making a new navigation, and the third one won't work now because I don't have a subsite on that one site that I'm showing. And let me change. I show you the site that I've prepared. So this is just a classic site. It's not modern site in this case. So I have here this PnP community demo site. And what I'm doing, I'm just creating a new release from a release definition. And then I will be running just this one. Give me a second. Create this. Go to my release. And then I will start deploying that one that I just showed. Yes, and that will be started. And then hopefully that my own agent is getting this one and then starting the task itself to deploy these things. So, and by the way, the Another opportunity for the ones who don't know or who haven't used that much the VSTS, you have always, of course, the possibility to not put in the values yourself. You can use, of course, dynamic values with variables. So you have, when you're on the operations side, you always have the possibility to make it very dynamic to the part where you want to deploy it to. So the deployment hasn't started yet, so I hope it will be deploying very soon. If not, then we need to check what's going on. Maybe it hasn't started. I just click again. Now it's okay. Maybe I didn't deploy properly. So the agent will start very soon. It's initializing. And then you can see that it's going through all the tasks. It's downloading the artifacts, the XML files that I had in my build package. And then it's trying to execute the inline task for this one. So basically this PowerShell, this XML file, which is basically just setting the site title. So when this is finished very soon, I'm of course giving some documentation out that you can see. So this is already finished. So when I jump back to my site, I should be able to see that this one changed from PnP Community to just having something else here that you can see. So I changed this one to projects. And then it's also going forward. And soon when we see that this one is going to the navigation part, then we should see also that the navigation should have changed from what you see here, notebooks, documents, pages. Just waiting for the agent to check in to this site. So it's logging in successfully and it's now running this task. Of course, I'm outputting all the warnings and errors that the PowerShell task, the PowerShell module is giving me. So when I'm now refreshing here again, I should see that all these links here are changed. So basically, you know the result definitely, but it's more about the ease of using this part for SharePoint. So it could be used by operations as well as if you have a SharePoint add-in and you need to have some SharePoint artifacts deployed. So everything that is basically possible with PnP PowerShell is also possible with these two tasks. So and just to give a bit of, now first to show you also how it's working. This one is basically put in GitHub. So it's open source, of course. And I give you the link here in the chat. And just to tell you, the whole pipeline, CI pipeline, which is publishing to the marketplace, is currently also backed by a VSTS. So the whole pipeline is there. I'm having contact currently with the VSTS team who's developing it. They announced some time ago that they also soon will support public projects. And I'm currently participating in that. The project is part of the public VSTS project. So soon this will be also available, the VSTS part, the whole pipeline will be visible also for public when they announced it is public. So, and just to tell that, and I need pretty much help because I want to improve this task. I have some roadmap brainstorming in mind. For example, I want to have the authentication a bit easier for operations, to not put the authentication directly in each task or in the release definition, but to have it more global in the whole project, so-called service endpoints in VSTS. I also want to create a task to deploy a site collection also, and also tasks for add-ins and SPFx solutions again. But for that, I need a bit help because that consumes some time. So anybody who wants to participate, you can get me on by email that you see on the slide, or you can get me on Twitter for Razor S-Point. I really would appreciate some help for this one. So that's for me.
Cool. Thank you, Sebastian. Really cool stuff. I think we need to, Hugo, if you start sharing, if there's any questions, let's have a discussion in our window. But this is really cool stuff, and it really helps on making the deployments more, let's say, flexible and automating stuff from a DevOps perspective. Really great stuff. Hugo, do we have a...
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, all good.
All right, so the premise is we needed to be able to, this was built for a large portal that had all custom web parts. And the number one rule that we had was the web parts that we build cannot look like they're custom. They have to look like they were out-of-the-box SharePoint web parts. That means it has to use Office Fabric, Office UI Fabric, and so on and so forth. The other kind of concept that we're trying to prove with this web part is the whole premise of SPFx has always been that with SPFx, we as third-party developers have the exact same tools that Microsoft has to create their web parts or first-party web parts. So I set out to create a web part that reproduces the event calendar web part, which I'll just switch over here. And I set out to build my own version of this web part. And the goal was to make it look exactly like and behave exactly like the SharePoint out-of-the-box web parts. So if I just show you to start with what the out-of-the-box web part does, first of all, it is responsive. So if you move around, it'll go from a carousel view to eventually what should happen is it'll switch to less items. And if the demo gods are with me, what should happen is when I resize this, yes, there you go, we switch to a list view. So what I wanted to do was to create that same functionality with a custom RSS feed. But then as I started building it, I decided, you know what, it would be really cool if I could actually feed from WordPress events, an iCal feed, or an RSS feed. And before I continue, one thing I want to make clear here is I built this with the idea that this was going to be extensible. So if any of you have any type of feeds that you would like to add to this sample, I'd be more than happy to either do it or work with you to do this. One of the things you'll notice, I didn't bother creating a SharePoint event feed. Let me know in the chat window if you think I should do a SharePoint event feed, but I figured we already have a kick-ass SharePoint event feed out of the box. So how this is built, and hopefully you can see on the side here, we have kind of one web part, which is the calendar feed summary. And then I created a shared folder for shared components and shared services. And the idea here is eventually I would like to be able to add different types of calendar feed web parts. So for example, calendar feed search, or maybe something that uses dynamic data to feed events from one web part to another. So everything was built using shared services and shared components. Let me start with the services. The services, I created a shared calendar service, and then I created a whole bunch of services that implement the iCalendar service interface. And pretty much the iCalendar service, I got your message about the Exchange Online calendar feed. I'll take a look at that. So all the iCalendar service does is really has a method that it calls getEvent, and then there's some additional things that allows us to use cores, that allows us to specify the duration and the URL for the feed. And then each item, whether it's the WordPress one or whether it's the iCal, whatever, they all implement the iCalendar interface. The other thing that it does is I've created a base calendar class which implements some of the functions to do some generic stuff like filtering events, replacing replacement tokens, fetching responses using cores and things like that. So each of the providers that I've created will actually extend the class and implement the interface as well. The reason why I've approached this, and one of the things you'll notice is every provider returns a name. Why did I do that? It's because I'm really lazy, and I wanted to actually create something that allowed me to, when I add a new provider, I didn't want to have to change any code anywhere except for maybe one place, and this is the place. And trust me, if I could have found a way to just enumerate all the iCalendar service interfaces in the library, I would have done that. I didn't find a way to do that. So what I do here is, if I create a new, let's say I wanted to create the new Exchange online calendar feed, I would create a new class that implements the interface, and I would go to my list of providers, and I would just push the list of providers here. In debug mode, what you'll notice is that I've added a mock calendar provider. This is just to make it easier to test and obviously debug. So this is really how all the providers work. And I must say that the premise behind these service providers was really not, like, this is not really probably the best code you've ever seen when it comes to the service provider. The point was not to create the service provider. The point was really to create a screen that looks and feels like SharePoint. So there are some things that I'm doing that I'm not necessarily the proudest. One of the ways is how I handle cores. So I don't know where that is exactly in my code. But so if you actually look at this and you say, hey, I have a better way to do this, please let me know. I think this is how I handle cores here, where I just use cores anywhere if you want to use cores. For those of you who don't know what cores is sometimes if you're trying to request content from a different domain, you know, if the content provider does not support cross-origin requests, you may be blocked. You may get an error message saying, hey, I'm not giving you this content. So by using you know, something like Course Anywhere, I can actually go through an accepted cross-origin to show the events. So if I show you here, I'll just mouse over a little bit until the provider, come on. Of course, because I'm trying to do this, it's going to be stubborn about switching to a list. So I have a list of events here, and hopefully on the SharePoint side, I have a list of events. Now, just before the demo, I changed the size of this because when you're using the workbench and you go too small, it starts complaining about the screen being too small. So I changed the threshold here. But you see, this is very consistent with the approach that we have here. And I'll show you how I've implemented that in 1 second. Actually, I've already pretty much exceeded my time. All right, so the components that we have is we have a component that implements the carousel. And this is actually using Slick, which when I looked at how Microsoft implemented this, it really looked like they were using Slick. So I've actually created a Slick handler, that component that allows me to just pass a bunch of items in the container, and it will handle it. If I increase the size here, it will start handling it like a Slick interface like this. The other thing that I've done is I've actually created a date box component, which allows me to just pass a date, and I'm in my code, I'm using Moment to actually convert all the dates, handle the time zones, the localization of dates, and things like that. So one of the things that you'll notice is if you use a feed from a different time zone, it'll actually start rendering the dates. You know, it'll convert the date and time to a time zone that is applicable for the user. Let me just give you an example here. I'll use, so I already use an RSS feed here. If I switch to an iCal and I pick, here's the Canadian holidays, and I apply this, it automatically switches here to full day events. And if I take, for example, a big WordPress event calendar feed, and I switch this here, and I click apply, we should be getting the WordPress events. Now the events are being cached on the client side because some of these feeds are sometimes very slow. You can disable the caching here by changing the cache duration. I set it to 15 minutes for the demo, but you can definitely change that at your leisure. If I increase the size of this here a little bit, again, you'll see that it continues resizing. How is that done? Well, I'm actually using in my rendering here of my calendar feed summary, I really have two render methods. One which is narrow and one which is a render normal. And then I have a event that monitors for resizing of the web part so that I can actually render the web parts properly. The render narrow will actually render the list, but it'll actually render the list in a paging control that I've created. I looked everywhere on the Office UI fabric for a paging control. Everybody's saying there was not one and they wish there was one. So I created one, and what it does, it actually receives a list of items and it does the pagination of these items. So if you're on a small list again, oops, maybe, you can actually paginate through the events. So this is actually a super quick tour of the components that I've used to build this. Every one of these components were built to be reusable. Eventually, when we hopefully one day we'll be able to create reusable component libraries for SPFx projects. And hopefully we can move these components to reusable controls, and I'm seeing a lot of comments that are saying that. But if you want to participate to this, if you want to add event providers, please let me know. Do pull requests in the GitHub project, and I will look at adding the Exchange provider. I'm going to do a pull request, because I've converted this project to SPFx 1.5 using the cool new update project command in the Office 365 CLI. If you haven't used it, I recommend that you look at it. Yes, you can download the project on GitHub. I'll copy and paste the link here. That's it for me, guys.
Thanks, Hugo. Excellent work again. So really cool stuff. And absolutely, let's work on getting some of those reusable controls to the reusable SPFx reusable control side, because we really rather want to see one set of reusable controls across the whole community and us working together and sharing the best things, because we're looking into feeding some out-of-the-box controls there as well. So anyway, Patrick.
So I do want to mention your invites in your calendar expire this week. We'll be getting a new invite out for the meeting. We will have a meeting on July 5th. The next SPFx JS SIG will be July 5th, but you do not have an invite for that yet. Don't worry. We are having the meeting. We will get the new invites for the next year out, next Microsoft fiscal year. And we do, of course, have the General Development SIG on June 28th. That's next Thursday. Look forward to seeing everybody there. Thank you all for sticking with us a few minutes over time. And everybody have a great weekend.
Thank you for the great demos. Bye-bye.